Most visitors come to Yellowstone for the geysers and wildlife. They photograph bears and bison. They wait for Old Faithful's clockwork eruption. They walk the boardwalks over boiling pools. What they don't see, what they can't possibly know, is the other layer that exists here, the one documented not in visitor guides, but in quiet memos and vanished files, the one we, the rangers, are instructed to never, ever discuss with the public. My name is Eli Vance. For 12 years, I've worn the badge and the flat hat. People have a romantic idea of this job, saving foolish tourists from themselves, gentle encounters with majestic creatures. That's the brochure version. The reality includes something else entirely. The patrols that don't make the logs, the evidence that gets cataloged and then disappears, the geographic anomalies we're told to manage, not understand. This is an account of the patrol that broke my understanding of this park. It's about what I found in a place called Specimen Ridge, the 4 hours of my life I can't account for, and the silent protocol that ensures some truths about Yellowstone remain forever buried. Listen closely. The incident that changed everything began on a September day, so perfectly autumn it felt staged. The summer tourist swell had receded, leaving the park to breathe. The air held that sharp, clean cold that smells of coming snow, and the aspen groves were coins of gold against the dark evergreen. I was on a routine patrol in the northeast sector, an area seasoned rangers quietly called the Quiet Quadrant. It's less dramatic than the geyser basins, a sprawling network of rolling valleys, remote thermal vents, and old forestry service roads that mostly see elk and the occasional backcountry hiker. My assignment was mundane. Check trail conditions, note wildlife activity, be a visible presence. It was the kind of shift where you spend more time with your own thoughts than with people. The radio call came in at 14-17 hours. Dispatch, usually a model of composed efficiency, sounded off. Unit 7. We have a low-priority report of atypical wildlife activity near the Specimen Ridge Overlook. Call was a day hiker. Description is vague, advising you for awareness. I keyed to my copy dispatch. Define atypical. There was a pause, the kind filled with a soft crackle of empty bandwidth. Caller stated the birds in the area were, and I'm quoting here, flying incorrectly. No visible distress. No ground activity. Just the birds. A report about badly flown birds. Under any other circumstance, it would be the punchline to a joke at the ranger station, filed under tourist nonsense and forgotten. But it was a dispatcher's tone that hooked me, a subtle, unfamiliar strain of uncertainty bleeding through professional monotone. It wasn't fear. It was the careful hesitation of someone relaying information they didn't believe but were obligated to pass on. Acknowledged, I responded, I'm in the general area. I'll make a visual check. The decision felt innocuous, a minor detour on a slow afternoon. The drive to Specimen Ridge Trailhead is a lesson in leaving the known world behind. The paved road shrunk to gravel, then to a pair of dirt ruts carved through sagebrush and grass. In the rear-view mirror, the last signs of human order dwindled to nothing. This is the deep backcountry, where the scale of the land humbles you into silence. But the silence here isn't peaceful. After so many years, I've learned to distinguish types of quiet. There's the busy quiet of meadow at dawn, full of insect hum and avian chatter. There's a respectful quiet of ancient forest. The quiet of the northeast sector is different. It's absorptive. It feels less like an absence of sound and more like a presence that swallows it. I parked at the empty trailhead. The engines rumble, leaving a void in its wake. Stepping out, I looked up immediately, and I saw it. The caller hadn't been wrong. The birds were incorrect. A murder of ravens, perhaps 30 strong, rode the air current above the ridge. But they weren't soaring, diving, or engaging in complex, squabbling social dances I'd observed for years. They were arranged in a vast, rotating circle, each bird spaced perfectly from the next, maintaining an identical altitude. Their wing beats were synchronized. The formation was geometrically perfect. A stark, black wheel turning with silent, mechanical precision against a slate-gray sky. It was breathtaking and utterly alien. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. This wasn't unusual animal behavior. This was a violation of animal behavior. I'd seen ravens play in the wind, communicate with complex aerials, even mimic sounds. I had never, in over a decade of dedicated observation, seen them execute flawless, drone-like formation flying at MY training kicked in, compartmentalizing the unease. Document first, theorize later. I grabbed my field pack, ensuring my radio was secure and my bear spray accessible. The trail began as a well-defined path through lodgepole pine, the air smelling of damp pine needles and cold earth. Normal ground signs were everywhere. Fresh elk droppings, the distinctive track of a black bear, the skittering of chipmunks in the understory. Life was proceeding at foot level. But above, that terrible wheel continued to turn, a silent, watchful compass pointing to nothing. A mile in, the first tangible wrongness presented itself. Just off the trail, in a small clearing dappled with weak sunlight, lay the body of a young mule deer buck. I approached slowly, scanning the tree line for predators, the adrenaline of a potential mountain lion encounter rising. But there was nothing, no movement. As I drew closer, the scene's strangeness overrode the initial predator alert. The deer was on its side, legs extended straight out as if in mid-leap, yet it lay perfectly still. Its neck was arched back, muzzle pointing at the sky. Its eyes were open, clouded with the film of death, but unusually wide. The mouth was also open, frozen in a soundless cry. There were no marks on it. No claw slashes, no bullet wounds, no signs of chase or struggle. The fur was unmarred. It looked posed, placed. The body was fresh, maybe a day old at most, yet it was completely untouched by scavengers. No ravens had pecked at it. No magpies hopped nearby. Crucially, there were no flies. In late September, in Wyoming, on a fresh carcass, the absence of insects was more shocking than the corpse itself. It defied the fundamental order of decomposition. I knelt, pulling out my notebook and camera. The professional ritual, noting GPS coordinates, approximate weight, ambient conditions, was a lifeline to normality. As I wrote, describing the unnatural posture, I became gradually aware of a new silence descending. The faint rustle of the pine boughs ceased. The distant chatter of the creek faded. The ever-present whisper of the wind died completely. It was as if a giant glass dome had been lowered over the clearing. In that absolute vacuum-sealed quiet, my own breathing sounded ragged and obscene. Then the smell arrived. Not the rich, organic scent of decay, but something sharp, metallic, and chemically caustic. It was the smell of an electrical fire, of ozone after a lightning strike, mixed with something bitter and artificial. It burned the lining of my nose and made my eyes water. A sudden, visceral wave of dread, a primal signal that had nothing to do with rational thought, flooded my system. I stood up so quickly the world swam. This was no longer a curious, natural mystery. This was a contamination. Something in this place was deeply, fundamentally unclean. The rational part of my mind, the ranger part, began running diagnostics. Possible toxic gas seepage from a thermal vent, a localized pesticide drift. But the animal's posed body and the silent, synchronized birds argued against any simple explanation. My hand went to my radio. I needed to call this in now. This had just escalated from an oddity to an incident. MY transmission was brief and urgent. Dispatch, this is Unit 7. I have a code 12 at my location. Multiple unexplained animal mortalities. No visible cause. Request immediate wildlife biology support. Possible environmental hazard. My voice sounded tight, foreign to my own ears. The static that followed was a normal, crisp white noise of an open channel. Then the dispatcher's voice, now stripped of its earlier uncertainty. All business. Copy, Unit 7. Confirm your coordinates. I read them off, the numbers feeling insignificant against the sheer wrongness surrounding me. Understood. Stand by for ETA. Maintain position and avoid further contact with the subject. The directive was clear, the protocol unambiguous. In a suspected contamination scenario, you isolate and wait. But as I clipped the radio back to my belt, a heavier silence returned. I looked at the deer, then back up the trail toward the ridgeline, now shrouded in the lengthening shadows of the peaks. The logical course was to retreat to my vehicle. Yet, a stubborn, professional drive argued against it. You're already exposed. You've seen the epicenter, but not the source. What if this is spreading? What if there's an active leak, a vent spewing something lethal that's drifting downwind? The investigator in me, the part trained to find root causes, overruled the cautious protocol. I wouldn't go far, just to the next bend, to see if the source was visible, a quick reconnaissance to inform the response team. I told myself it was responsible. The chemical smell intensified as I moved away from the deer, a scent that seemed to coat the back of my throat. The forest remained in that profound, dead hush. My own movement through it felt like a violation. Every footfall on the gravelly path, every brush of my pack against a branch, echoed with grotesque loudness. Then, another half-mile up, I found the second body, an adult female elk, lying in the middle of the trail itself. She was in the same horrific pose as a deer, legs rigidly extended, neck craned back, eyes and mouth open to the sky. The same perfect, unblemished coat, the same complete absence of scavengers or insects, the same aura of careful, dreadful placement. The sheer replication broke through my professional detachment. One strange carcass could be a fluke, a bizarre neurological event, a unique poisoning. Two, identical in their unnatural presentation, pointed to a pattern, an intelligence behind the effect. My headache would have been a dull presence, suddenly sharpened into a driving throb behind my eyes, a painful pulsing time of my heartbeat. Nausea swam in my gut. The symptoms were textbook. Toxic exposure. I fumbled for my radio again, my fingers clumsy. Dispatch, Unit 7. Additional casualty located. Same presentation. I am experiencing physiological effects. Headache, nausea. Advise on the transmission died. Not with a crackle of poor reception, but with a sudden, absolute cessation of sound, as if the device had been unplugged from the universe. I stared at it. The power light was green. I toggled the channel selector. Nothing, not even the hiss of dead air. It was a brick. I pulled out my personal cell phone. Earlier, at the trailhead, I'd had 2 bars. Now the screen showed the stark, definitive words, no service, not searching, just a flat declaration of disconnection, a cold that had nothing to do with the autumn air locked my spine. Communication failure is a known risk in the backcountry. But this felt different. This wasn't a weak signal. It was an eradication of signal. The silence wasn't just auditory now. It was informational. I was severed. Protocol was screaming at me now. Return to vehicle. Now. My body tensed to obey. But my eyes were drawn up the switchback trail to the rocky crest of Specimen Ridge. Perhaps only another 30 minutes climb. From that vantage, I could see for miles. I could spot a gas plume, a thermal vent, something to explain this. I could use the altitude to maybe regain a sliver of cell signal. The arguments felt weak even as I formed them. The truth was, a deeper, more unsettling curiosity had taken hold. After seeing the birds, after the bodies, after the severed connection, I needed to see. I needed a vantage point to comprehend the scale of the wrongness. 20 minutes, I whispered aloud to the silent trees, as if making a bargain with the forest itself. Up and down. Visual confirmation only. The final ascent was the most disorienting stretch of trail I have ever walked. The silence became a physical pressure against my eardrums. The light, though the sun was still well above the horizon, took on a thin, watery quality, failing to penetrate the deep green shadows of the fir groves. Those shadows themselves seemed wrong, too long, too deep, as if cast by a sun lower in the sky than it actually was. My sense of time began to elasticize. A switchback with massive, endless, corrugated trunk. Then I'd blink and find myself at its crest without memory of the steps in between. A coyote. This one shattered the pattern. It wasn't posed dramatically. It lay curled on its side, nose tucked under its bushy tail, in the classic, peaceful posture of a sleeping dog. It looked comfortable, at rest. The relief I felt at this break in the horrific pattern was immediate and short-lived, because as I took a cautious step closer, I saw its eyes. They were open, and in their glassy, lifeless depths, there was a quality of attention, of awareness. It was a trick of the light, a macabre optical illusion born of my stressed mind. But as I shifted my position, the faint reflection in those dead orbs seemed to track me. The coyote's head hadn't moved a millimeter, but its gaze appeared to follow. A scream, pure and animal, clawed its way up my throat and lodged there. I took 2 stumbling steps back. I did not raise my camera. No photograph could capture what I felt radiating from that still form, a profound, intelligent malice masquerading as repose. This was not evidence to be collected. It was a warning to be heeded. Every primal instinct I possessed was now a unified siren. Get out! I broke into a jog, the need to see the vista forgotten, replaced by the urgent need to confirm that the normal world still existed beyond this haunted slope. I scrambled the last few yards to the rocky summit of Specimen Ridge, and found no vista at all. A wall of fog, thick as curdled milk and utterly motionless, blanketed the top of the ridge. It didn't swirl or drift. It clung to the ground in a perfect, level layer about 6 feet high, like a solid, roiling tabletop. Visibility dropped to less than 50 feet. The chemical smell here was so potent my eyes streamed, blurring my vision further. My headache escalated to a piercing shriek between my temples. Then I saw the shapes. Silhouettes within the fog. Tall, vertical, and unnaturally slender. Humanoid, but not human. They stood in a wide, evenly spaced circle, their forms blurred and indefinite in the dense mist. 6 of them. Maybe 8. They were perfectly still. I stood frozen at the center of this silent congregation. They did not move toward me. They did not need to. My breath hitched. I blinked, trying to clear my stinging eyes. When I looked again, the circle seemed tighter. The shapes were closer. I turned my head slowly to look at one directly, focusing all my attention on it. It remained static, a vague pillar of gray, but in my peripheral vision, I sensed the others shifting? No, not shifting, relocating. The moment my direct focus left them, they used the opportunity to close the distance. They moved only when unobserved. A sound rose and, not from the shapes, but from the fog itself, a low, subaudible hum that vibrated in my teeth and bones, a frequency that spoke to something reptilian in my brain. It was a sound of static from a dead universe. The final thread of my courage snapped. I turned and fled, not down the trail, but straight down the steep mountainside, crashing through underbrush, sliding on loose scree, driven by a single imperative: away. The descent was a blind, panic-fueled route. Logic and trailcraft were gone. I was an animal fleeing a forest fire, every snap of a branch behind me a potential reaching hand. I crashed through thickets of willow that tore at my clothes, slid down gravelly ravines, my boots skidding on beds of pine needles. The all-consuming fog thinned, then vanished as I dropped below the ridgeline, but the oppressive silence and the chemical reek persisted, a miasma clinging to me. I hit the main trail again farther down, my heart hammering against my ribs. I didn't stop. The carcasses were still there, the deer, the elk. But now, as I passed in my terrified flight, I registered others. A second elk bull, partially obscured by a fallen log. Another mule deer fawn. Their poses were variations on the theme, some rigidly extended, others curled like the coyote, all with those wide, staring, vacant eyes. The forest floor was becoming a gallery of the silently slaughtered. The smell was no longer just in the air. It felt embedded in my sinuses, my hair, my clothing. By the time the terrain leveled out, and I spotted the dull gleam of my truck through the trees, my body was failing the mind's command to run. I was dizzy, my vision tunneling. Waves of nausea crested, and I had to stop, bracing my hands on my knees, dry heaves racking me. I was a trained professional in peak physical condition, and whatever was in that air had reduced me to a stumbling, sickened wreck in under 2 hours. The rational label toxic exposure finally fit a cold, clinical box in which I could temporarily store the horror of the shapes, the moving figures, the intelligent gaze of the dead coyote. Stumbling the final 100 yards, I focused on the truck as a totem of the normal world, metal, gasoline, manufactured order. As I drew near, a new detail, small and wrong, snagged my attention. The driver's side door was ajar, open by a precise 2 inches. I was a maniac about closing and locking my vehicle in the backcountry. Always. I approached slowly, the bear spray now in my hand, its canister feeling pitifully small. Peering inside, I saw nothing disturbed. My logbook was on the passenger seat, my coffee thermos in the cup holder that I circled to the front. On the hood, in a thin layer of dust and pollen, were 3 clear, deep impressions in a perfect equilateral triangle. Each was circular, about the size of a baseball, pressed into the metal with enough force to leave a subtle dent. They were not footprints. They were pressure points, as if a tripod of immense weight had been set down there. Something had waited for me, or watched the truck. I didn't touch them. I just stared, the last of my adrenaline bleeding away into a deep, bone-weary shock. Sliding into the driver's seat felt like entering a spaceship capsule after a spacewalk gone wrong. I pulled the door shut with a solid, familiar thunk. The sound of the lock engaging was the sweetest noise I'd ever heard. My hands trembled as I fitted the key into the ignition. The engine turned over with a healthy roar, and instantly the cab filled with the crackle of the radio. "Vance, this is dispatch. Do you copy?" "Unit 7, respond." The voice was sharp with strained patience. I grabbed the mic, my throat dry. "Dispatch, this is Unit 7. I copy." A palpable wave of relief came through the speaker. "Vance, what is your status?" "You've been out of contact for 4 hours and 17 minutes. We were moments from launching at the truck's digital clock. Both read 1842. I had left the trailhead at 14:15. The math was inescapable and impossible. The hike up, the findings, the terror on the ridge, the chaotic descent, the entire experience had subjective duration of maybe 2 hours at the outside. Where were the other 2? Where had I been? A void open in my memory, a black pool of unaccounted for time. My voice, when it came, was a hollow rasp. "Copy. I'm at the vehicle. Experienced total comms failure. Returning to station now. Are you injured? Do you require medical?" "Negative. I'm fine." The lie was automatic. Just took longer than expected. Acknowledge. Proceed directly. The drive back was a blur of aspen groves and shadowy meadows. I kept checking the rear-view mirror, expecting to see something in the road behind me, a shape in the trees. The world looked normal, beautiful even in the twilight, but felt like a painted backdrop, thin and fragile. I had passed through a tear in it, and I couldn't unsee the darkness behind the canvas. Back at the ranger station, under the fluorescent lights, the incident hardened into a report. I typed with clinical detachment. Responded a report of unusual wildlife behavior near Specimen Ridge. Located multiple ungulate carcasses, species. Otocoileus hemianus, Cervus canadensis, displaying no visible trauma or signs of predation. Evidence of possible localized toxic gas emission, hydrogen sulfide/carbon dioxide. Noted, experienced physiological symptoms, cephalgia, nausea, and temporary comm/electronic failure. Area should be investigated by wildlife biology for possible subsurface thermal vent. I attached 3 photos from my phone. 2 were blurry, overexposed shots of the deer and elk, showing little detail. The third, of the Raven Formation, was just a smudge of black dots against a bright sky. Useless. I submitted the report at 2200 hours. The next morning at 8:30, a summons came from Chief Ranger Wilkins. His office was a testament to decades of service. Worn maps, framed awards, the smell of old coffee and pine cleaner. He didn't speak at first, just gestured for me to sit, my printed report on the desk between us. He was a tall, lean man in his late 50s, with a face weathered by a lifetime of mountain sun and a gaze that missed nothing. "Eli," he began, steepling his fingers. "Walk me through it, not the report. What happened?" I did. I kept it factual, but this time I included the bird's mechanical flight, the profound silence, the chemical smell, the calm's blackout. I left out the coyote's tracking eyes. I left out the shapes in the fog. Those details lived in the realm of hallucination, of a mind under stress. I presented the case for a potent, unseen geothermal toxin. He listened without interruption, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he let the silence hang for a full minute. Then he sighed, a sound of profound weariness, and unlocked a deep drawer in his desk. He pulled out a file, not a modern folder, but a thick, expandable leather accordion file, its edges frayed. He dropped it on the desk with a soft thump. "You're not the first," he said quietly. He opened the file. The top document was an incident report from 1987. Ranger J. Phillips responded to a call about erratic elk behavior near Specimen Ridge. Found multiple carcasses, no visible cause. Reported a thick, disorienting haze and unaccountable radio silence. Was found unconscious on the trail 6 hours later. Diagnosed with exposure to volcanic gases. Resigned 3 months after. The next was from 1993. Then 1998. 2004. 2011. Different names, different seasons. The same outlines. Strange animal behavior, dead wildlife in odd positions, equipment failure, personnel experiencing disorientation, headaches, lost time. The official cause was always the same, geothermal gas. Officially, Wilkins said, tapping the file, it's a known hazard. Subsurface vents, pockets of CO2, H2S. They kill animals all the time. They can cause confusion, amnesia, even death in high concentrations. It's the official story because it's scientifically plausible and it keeps the paperwork clean. He closed the file, his hand resting on it. Unofficially, he looked at me, and for the first time, I saw past the chief ranger facade. I saw the haunted look of a man who has carried a secret for too long. Unofficially, we don't send people up there alone anymore. We don't advertise it. We don't formally close the area. but we manage the access. We discourage it in briefings. We pair up if someone has to go. And when someone comes back from Specimen Ridge looking the way you do right now," he said, his eyes holding mine, "we tell them to write their report, file it, and move the hell on. Don't dwell. Don't go back. Don't let it get its hooks into you. It's—" I asked, the word leaving my lips before I could stop it. "Some things in this park," Wilkins said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "don't have explanations we can put in a memo. Our job isn't to understand every mystery. Our job is to manage the park and protect the visitors. Sometimes that management means leaving certain stones unturned. Permanently." He slid the file back into its drawer and locked it. The meeting was over. The message was delivered. I was now part of the quiet protocol. I left Wilkins's office carrying a new weight. It wasn't just a memory of the ridge. It was a confirmation that my experience was part of a recurring managed phenomenon. The terror was now married to a deep institutional unease. The park wasn't just hiding something from the public. It was hiding it from itself, from its own people in plain sight. Manage it, don't understand it. The phrase became a dark mantra. For a few weeks, I tried to obey. I threw myself into routine patrols, paperwork, visitor interactions. I filed my report and watched it vanish into the digital archive, another line in a decades-long log of geothermal incidents. But my mind was a search engine with a new query. The unasked questions festered. Where did the bodies go when the science teams arrived? Why did the effects seem to target perception and memory? What were the shapes? The quiet protocol required willful ignorance, and I found I was a poor candidate. I began noticing the architecture of the silence. It was in the way veteran rangers talked, or more accurately, didn't talk. In the break room, stories flowed freely about bear jams, tourist stupidity, epic rescues. But certain place names acted as conversational kill switches. Mention Specimen Ridge, and a subtle, almost imperceptible pause would occur before someone smoothly changed the subject. Pelican Valley had the same effect. A thermal area west of Thumb. Turbid Lake. These names carried a charge. I started looking at park maps with new eyes. Not the glossy visitor maps, but the internal topographic surveys, the historical layouts, the GIS layers on our work computers. And there, I found the first tangible evidence of the quiet protocol's geography. Scattered across the park were zones, never outlined boldly, never labeled with warnings, but subtly differentiated. On some maps, they were shaded a slightly different tone of green. On digital GIS layers, they sometimes appeared as faint cross-hatching or were omitted from certain recommended trail overlays altogether. These zones were remote, lacking infrastructure, and crucially, each one corresponded to a name from the unspoken list. Specimen Ridge was one. Pelican Valley. Turbid Lake. I cross-referenced these shaded areas with the master log of search and rescue incidents and hazardous condition reports over the last 30 years. The correlation wasn't perfect, but it was stark. A disproportionate number of incidents involving disorientation, missing time, equipment failure, and unexplained animal deaths clustered in or near these softly shaded zones. The reports always concluded with terms like presumed gas seepage, psychological effect of isolation, or unfortunate coincidence. The park, I realized, was a palimpsest. The public layer was one of majestic, understandable nature. Beneath it was an operational layer of known hazards, geysers, bears, cliffs. And beneath that, carefully unacknowledged, was a third layer, a sporadic, anomalous geography that didn't play by the established rules. Wilkins hadn't just given me a warning. He'd given me the key to see the park's hidden blueprint. This hidden geography explained the veteran rangers' behavior. They weren't being mysterious. They were adhering to an unspoken survival cartography. They knew which valleys could swallow an afternoon, which ridges could scramble a radio, which lakeside meadows could leave you questioning your own memories. This knowledge wasn't written down. It was passed through cautious advice, through volunteer partnerings on patrol, through the gentle steering of a rookie away from particular trail assignment point 3 days after my meeting with Wilkins, the external validation I both craved and dreaded arrived. A team from the University of Montana's Wildlife Biology Department, led by Dr. Eris Thorne, requested a guide to the Specimen Ridge coordinates from my report. They were polite, efficient, and brimming with rational curiosity. They wanted to test soil, air, and water for novel pathogens or toxins. Part of me screamed to refuse, to invent an obligation. But a larger part, the part still clinging to the hope of a normal explanation, agreed. I needed to see the place through their eyes. I needed it to be a gas leak. The return was surreal. The weather was identical, crisp, clear autumn. The drive felt normal. The trailhead was just a trailhead. As we geared up, I scanned the sky. Normal bird activity. Sparrows, a hawk, no synchronized ravens. The forest sounded like a forest. Wind, distant water, birdsong. The oppressive silence was gone. The chemical stench was absent. With Dr. Thorne and his 2 graduate students chatting about sampling protocols, the hike felt like a routine escort duty. We reached the GPS coordinates for the first deer. The clearing was empty. Not a bone, not a scrap of fur, no disturbance in the pine duff. Just a sun-dappled patch of grass. "You're certain this was a location?" Thorne asked, checking his high-precision GPS unit against my recorded numbers. They matched to within 3 feet. I was certain. We fanned out, searching a widening radius. Nothing. The same story at the L coordinates. No body. No drag marks. No evidence that a 700-pound animal had died there days before. It was as if the forest had digested the evidence completely. One of the grad students, a woman named Lena, was using a real-time gas analyzer. As we approached the final climb to the ridge, its display beeped softly. "Elevated hydrogen sulfide," she announced, showing Thorne the readout. Not dangerous levels, but above background, consistent with a minor, diffuse seep. Thorne nodded, making a note. "Plausible source for your symptoms," he said to me, his tone professional. Closing the loop, we summited the ridge. The view was breathtaking. Exactly as it should have been, a panoramic vista of rolling forest, the distant silver thread of a river, the Absaroka Range purple on the horizon. No fog, no shapes. The sun was warm. It was magnificent, and it felt like a personal rebuke. Had I hallucinated at all? Had a whiff of toxic gas fabricated the entire nightmare? The relief was tainted by a strange sense of loss, as if I preferred the horror to the implication that my own mind was so fragile. A.S. Thorne's team took soil samples. I wandered to the edge of the rocky summit, the place where the fog had been. I looked out, trying to reconcile the postcard beauty with my memory of the silent, encircled terror. My boot scuffed a patch of loose gravel, and I looked down. There, etched into the hard-packed dirt and stone, were dozens of faint, 3-pointed depressions, triangular sets of pits, the exact pattern from the hood of my truck. They were weathered, as if made by rain hitting the same spots for seasons, but their geometric perfection was undeniable. They formed no discernible larger pattern, just a scatter of identical sigils across the ridgetop. "Find something?" Lena asked, walking over. I pointed at the nearest set. "These marks. You see them?" She peered down, squinting. "Erosion, maybe? Frost heaving? Could be animal sign, but it's odd." Her tone was interested, not alarmed. She saw marks, but not the pattern, not the deliberate, repeating geometry that screamed manufactured, not natural. To her, it was a curiosity. To me, it was a signature, a receipt, proof that what had happened here left a trace, even if the main evidence had vanished. We hiked down. Dr. Thorne thanked me for my time. 2 weeks later, his report landed in my inbox. Its conclusions were a masterpiece of plausible explanation. No biological pathogens detected. Soil chemistry within normal parameters. Localized, non-hazardous levels of volcanic gases present. Animal mortalities likely attributable to acute gas exposure in a topographical depression, with scavenger removal explaining lack of remains. No further action recommended. The report was perfect. It used my observations as its foundation, provided a rational cause, and gently dismissed the anomalies, the missing bodies, the strange behavior, as expected outcomes within a natural order. It was a clinical, peer-reviewed version of quiet protocol. Case officially scientifically closed. But I had seen the marks, and I knew the bodies hadn't been scavenged. Nothing leaves a carcass that clean, that fast. The report was a fiction, a necessary fiction to maintain the park's two public faces, safety and scientific understanding. I was now complicit in maintaining that fiction. I had graduated from a victim of the phenomenon to a custodian of its secret. The official case was closed, but the mystery was now a living thing inside me. The quiet protocol demanded I forget, but the marks on the ridge were a seed of doubt that grew into a relentless need to know. I began using my off hours not to forget, but to remember, to dig. I requested access to the historical archives, a dusty basement room full of ledgers, correspondence, and surveys dating back to the Army's stewardship of Yellowstone in the 1880s. Most of it was bureaucratic chaff, supply inventories, patrol logs, payroll disputes. But buried within were glimmers. A report from a cavalry lieutenant in 1884 describing a zone of perplexity near the Lamar Valley where compasses spun freely and his detachment lost a full day, emerging with no memory and severe nosebleeds. A handwritten note from a trapper in 1871 appended to a map, "Country here moves. Do not camp." Then I found the crown jewel, a letter from Captain William H. Forbes, dated October 22, 1891, addressed to his commanding officer at Fort Yellowstone. His prose was formal, precise, and deeply troubled. "Sir, I must report a most peculiar and unsettling event. Pursuing reports from native scouts of sick elk, my detachment proceeded to the northern ridge country. We discovered a score of elk and bison carcasses, all deceased within a narrow time frame. The animals were contorted in unnatural attitudes, as if seized in a final, violent spasm. The air held a foul, metallic tang. Several men complained of blinding headaches and a profound sense of dislocation. Most disturbingly, Sergeant Connolly's pocket watch, a reliable instrument, advanced by 6 hours between one winding and the next, though subjective time felt like 3. I cannot account for this discrepancy. There is something amiss in that topography, something beyond hostile fauna or volatile terrain. I recommend this quadrant be surveyed by qualified geologists and, until then, designated permanently off-limits to all military and civilian personnel. We lack the framework to address what operates there. Captain Forbes died of a sudden fever 5 months later. His recommendation was filed and forgotten. The pattern was older than the Park Service itself. This historical validation was both vindicating and horrifying. My experience was an anomaly. It was a recurrence. The quiet protocol wasn't a modern management strategy. It was a tradition stretching back generations, a continuous thread of encounter, confusion, and institutional suppression. We weren't managing a natural hazard. We were caretakers for a haunted section of reality. My digging did not go unnoticed. 2 months after the Thorne report, I was again called into Wilkins's office. A different man sat across from him. He was in his late 50s, with a civil servant's neat haircut and a suit that seemed out of place amidst the park's rustic decor. He introduced himself as Mr. Shaw, from the Department of the Interior's Long-Term Ecological Monitoring Division, a title that felt intentionally bland. "Ranger Vance," Shaw began, his voice devoid of inflection. "We understand you've taken an interest in historical park incidents. Captain Forbes's letters are quite engaging, aren't they?" The air left the room. They had been monitoring my archive requests. Wilkins stared at a point on the wall behind me. I was seeking context. I managed. "Context is valuable," Shaw agreed, "but it must be properly contextualized. You experience a class 2 perceptual anomaly in a designated zone of elevated phenomenological activity. ZPA, your report was handled correctly. The follow-up by Dr. Thorne was textbook. The historical records you found are part of the longitudinal data set. He spoke a new language, one of chilling bureaucracy applied to the inexplicable. So it's real, I said, the words feeling dangerous. Your experience was genuine, Shaw corrected. The phenomenology is consistent and documented across multiple zepas in the national park system. Whether it is real in an objective, material sense is a philosophical question. What we know is that certain geographic locations exhibit stable properties that interfere with human perception, local causality, and the flow of time. They are, for lack of a better term, glitches, anomalies. Their nature is non-invasive and non-expansive. They have existed, unchanged, for longer than our records. And the animals? The shapes? The questions tumbled out. Side effects, Shaw said, waving a dismissive hand. The local biome interacts with the anomalous properties. The shapes are likely subjective interpretations of informational static, a projection of the mind trying to parse incompatible sensory data. The official gas seepage explanation is a useful model. It is functionally true for management purposes. I looked at Wilkins, who refused to meet my eye. He was a prisoner of the same truth. What's the real purpose? Just to hide it? The purpose, Shaw said, leaning forward slightly, is stewardship. Public knowledge would lead to panic, pilgrimages, attempts to exploit or weaponize these zones. More people would vanish. The phenomena themselves might react. Our stewardship ensures minimal interaction. We monitor. We occasionally lose a lone hiker or an overcurious ranger. It is an acceptable, if regrettable, statistical loss. The greater good is containment. And if I decide the public should know, I asked a futile challenge. Shaw's expression didn't change, but his eyes turned cold. Then you would be a ranger who failed to return from a routine patrol. A tragedy. A search would find nothing. Your file would join Captain Forbes's. The park is vast, Ranger Vance. It swallows secrets and people with equal efficiency. Do we understand each other? The threat was naked, delivered in a monotone. I nodded. The meeting was over. I left that room a different man. I had gone from witness to investigator to a threatened asset. The park's beauty was now a mask, its vastness a threat. I began to see the evidence of the zepas, Shaw's term, everywhere, not just in shaded map areas, but in the behavior of other rangers. The new recruit, eager and bright-eyed, asking about backcountry routes in the Northeast, and being gently but firmly redirected by a veteran. The way night patrol schedules for certain areas were always, coincidentally, doubled up. The unspoken rule that you never, ever went into a shaded zone alone, and you always kept your partner in direct line of sight. I also started seeing the aftermath. Last season, a backpacker vanished near Turbid Lake. The search was called off after 3 days when teams reported unreliable GPS and disorientation. His name was added to the list. Last month, a new ranger, a woman named Chloe, responded to a call about glowing fungi in a Pelican Valley meadow. She came back quiet, resigned a week later. She'd seen something, been told something, completed itself. She chose a quiet exit. I was monitoring the comms desk when a call came in. A hiker reported meadow birds over Specimen Creek. My blood went cold. The dispatcher, a new hire, began routing the call. Without thinking, I reached over and keyed my mic. Dispatch, this is Vance. I'm closer. I'll take it. I lied. I wasn't closer. But I knew who was on duty in that sector. Ben Riley, a kid with 6 months on the job, a wife, and a newborn. I couldn't let him walk into that clearing, hear that silence, see those shapes. I took the call. I drove to the trailhead. I stood at the tree line and used my binoculars. I saw them, the ravens, in their perfect, terrible wheel. I filed a report, investigated, found no evidence of reported phenomena, likely a play of light on a common murmuration. Case closed. I had become an enforcer of the quiet protocol. I had contained the anomaly, protected the new ranger, and lied on an official form. I had traded my curiosity for the safety of others, and in doing so, I had become part of the machine that keeps Yellowstone's deepest secrets. The park's most carefully guarded resource isn't its geysers or its wolves. It is the silence around its broken places, and I am now a keeper of that silence. This narrative woven from first-hand accounts and the documented patterns of what officials term zones of elevated phenomenological activity, reveals a hidden layer to the world we think we know. It's a layer where the rules of time, space, and biology seem to soften, where the natural world intersects with something profoundly other. This story from Yellowstone is not an isolated tale. It is a single thread in a vast tapestry of unexplained occurrences that exist in the remote corners of our maps, guarded by protocols of silence. If this journey into the quiet places has held your attention, if it has sparked a sense of recognition or a deeper curiosity about the frontiers of our understanding, then you are already listening for the signals in the static. This is the purpose of Winds of Thought. Our channel is dedicated to exploring these edges. We investigate accounts from forest rangers and lighthouse keepers, from long-haul sailors and desert surveyors, those whose professions place them on perceptual borderlands. We analyze patterns, cross-reference historical records, and present stories that operate in the space between known science and enduring mystery. We do not seek to prove or dismiss, but to document the consistent strangeness that persists at the margins of human experience. Continue this exploration with us. Your support is vital. Please, take a moment to tap the like button on this video. That single action is the strongest signal to the platform that content of this nature deserves to reach a wider audience. It directly helps others, who are also searching for these deeper narratives, find their way to this channel. Furthermore, if you want to ensure you never miss a descent into these mysteries, subscribe to Winds of Thought and click the notification bell. The next story is already in production, focusing on the audio logs from a decommissioned deep-sea research vessel and the frequencies its crew recorded that should not exist. Finally, community investigation is at our core. Your perspective is invaluable. Where are you watching from tonight? And more importantly, have you ever experienced a place that felt wrong? A patch of woods, a stretch of road, a forgotten building where the atmosphere shifted, time behaved oddly, or a deep, instinctive warning told you to leave? Share your location and your own brief account in the comments below. You are not alone in having noticed. By sharing, we begin to map the unseen geography together. Thank you for spending this time in the quiet zones. Remember, the most profound truths are often the ones whispered just below the threshold of hearing. Stay curious and listen closely. This has been Winds of Thought. Until next time.